when Vince met his father. His father was in the wrestling business as a wrestling promoter, and Vince, kind of hanging around with his dad, was thrown into the limelight of being an announcer by basically an announcer telling Vincent McMahon that he wanted a raise, and Vincent McMahon didn't want to give it to him. And the announcer threatened that he was going to no-show the show and he wasn't going to go out there, so they wouldn't have an announcer. And he was sitting there juggling his change. And Vince asked his dad, like, hey, what is the plan? What is it that you're going to do? And Vincent McMahon told Vince that he was going to go out there and be the announcer. And it seemed like he didn't really have any prep. But, watching him as an announcer on that show was honestly as good as we ever saw Vince, later on down the road. It seemed like he knew what he was doing. And Bruce Pritchard even chimed in to say that he was a horrible announcer. If you go back and you watch those old WWF pay-per-views from the 80s to 90s when Vince is on commentary, he isn't that good. But he's what we grew up with. And I think he is an excellent exclamation point. I think that, a lot of the times, like, the booker being the promoter makes sense, because sometimes the story isn't really being told, and you need the person who wrote the story to tell you exactly what is going on. That's the reason why, Vince is out there. If something sort of gets skipped, he just, picks it up, puts it in there, and it's in your mind if this is why it's going to happen. I always enjoyed Vince back in the day. I understand how he moved off of commentary, and we got guys like Jim Ross, Jerry Lawler, that we would, love down the road, but it is what it is, once he got into the wrestling business, he had caught wind that his father, wanted to get out of the wrestling business and was going to sell his company to Gorilla Monsoon. Gorilla Monsoon, we would all, I think most of us would grow up with him being an announcer. And that's really all that I knew of him. I remember the first time I ever saw an old videotape of him actually in the ring, a lot younger, looking a lot differently than he did as Gorilla, with Bobby Heenan, just being shocked and, kind of like putting it together. Well, I guess that makes sense why he's a wrestling announcer, but you just saw an old guy that was out there and just figured that was what his job was. The entirety of his time, coming up in the business was always being an announcer, but he actually was a main event draw that was able to go out there and do the towns. Vince went to his dad. He went to Vincent, and the price was $1 million, which was a lot of money, but they put a little bit down, and then they had increments that they had to make along the way with a final payment date. And what they didn't tell in this documentary that I think would have made him really look like he was very loyal to the people that was in him is that, Vincent told Vince that if he was going to take over his business, there was people that he had to be loyal to. One of those people was Gorilla Monsoon. Gorilla was there to always be watching, to making sure that, as this transition period was going on, that, he knew what he was doing and he wasn't going to get it over his head. I'm sure there was times that Gorilla got upset at Vince, thinking that he was doing things that he wouldn't have done. But I think there was probably times that, he was proud of him. And it was like, that he grew that company bigger than he ever thought it ever would have if he would have been the guy to buy it. They had shows. They got payments. They were able to make the payments to Vincent, and they were actually able to pay off the loan to his father and buy the company.